The digital underworld, the rise and fall of Silk Road. It was a quiet summer in 2011 when whispers began echoing through underground forums and anonymous message boards. Somewhere in the shadowy corners of the internet far beyond Google's reach, a new marketplace had appeared. It wasn't hosted on eBay, Amazon, or Craigslist. Instead, it lived deep within the Tor network, encrypted, anonymized, and unreachable through conventional browsers. The name of this hidden bazaar was Silk Road. On the surface, Silk Road was sleek and professional, reminiscent of any well-designed e-commerce site. It had product listings, seller ratings, customer reviews, and dispute resolution protocols. But this wasn't your typical online shop. Instead of clothes or electronics, you could buy heroin, LSD, forged passports, hacking tools, and even untraceable weapons, all paid for with Bitcoin. And behind it all, orchestrating every line of code and moderating every post, was a man who called himself the Dread Pirate Roberts. This is the story of Silk Road. A story of idealism turned criminal enterprise, of digital freedom clashing with law enforcement, and of a young man whose vision of an unregulated utopia would become one of the most controversial experiments in internet history. Ross William Ulbricht was born in Texas in 1984. A bright, introspective child, he excelled academically and took a deep interest in science, philosophy, and libertarian ideology. After graduating from the University of Texas with a degree in physics, he pursued a master's in materials science. But the academic path didn't satisfy him. Ross was drawn to something bigger, something freer. He believed deeply in personal liberty and voluntary association, values championed by thinkers like Ludwig von Mises and Ayn Rand. Government, in his eyes, was often a tool of oppression. The war on drugs. A destructive farce. Central banking. A legalized cartel. Ross dreamed of building a platform that would allow people to trade freely, without oversight or coercion. So, in early 2011, Ulbricht began developing what would become Silk Road. He taught himself how to use Tor, a network that anonymizes internet traffic, and integrated Bitcoin to ensure untraceable payments. He programmed obsessively, often working late into the night. To the world, he was just another young man in San Francisco. But behind the screen, he was creating a digital libertarian marketplace, one that would soon attract global attention. When Silk Road launched in February 2011, it was a modest operation. Ross initially seeded the site with a few products, including psychedelic mushrooms he had grown himself. Word spread quickly on internet forums like Reddit and 4chan. Drug dealers saw opportunity. Libertarians saw rebellion. Privacy advocates saw innovation. Within months, Silk Road had hundreds of listings. It became known as the Amazon of drugs. Buyers praised the site's escrow system, which held funds in trust until goods were received. Sellers benefited from anonymity and global reach. Everyone paid in Bitcoin, then a fringe currency trading below $5. To outsiders, it was chaos. But to Ross, this was order: voluntary transactions, protected from tyranny. Ross adopted the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts, a reference to the film The Princess Bride. In the movie, the name is passed down from one pirate to the next, symbolizing continuity and myth. Ross wanted the same for his identity. If ever caught, he reasoned, the authorities wouldn't be able to prove he was the founder. It was brilliant until it wasn't. By 2012, Silk Road was making millions. Estimates suggest the site facilitated over $1 billion in transactions during its short lifespan. But success brought attention, unwanted attention. U.S. law enforcement, led by the DEA, FBI, and IRS, began investigating the site. Undercover agents posed as buyers and sellers. They tracked packages. They tried to trace Bitcoin transactions. But Ross had been careful. He used pseudonyms, encrypted communications, and routing services. Silk Road servers were hidden behind layers of anonymity. But no one is perfect. Ross made a fatal mistake early on. When promoting Silk Road on forums, he used an old email address tied to his real name, rossulbricht@gmail.com, mailed to rossulbricht@gmail.com. This tiny breadcrumb, left carelessly behind, would become his undoing. By 2013, the manhunt was on. Multiple agencies worked tirelessly, tracing Ross's movements, analyzing digital footprints, and trying to unmask the dread pirate Roberts. Meanwhile, Ross traveled across the country, occasionally staying with friends, all while managing a criminal empire from his laptop. Then came the tipping point. Authorities identified Ross using public Wi-Fi at a San Francisco library. On October 1, 2013, agents staged a ruse to distract him. As Ross opened his laptop, an agent posing as a couple started a loud argument behind him. Ross turned, momentarily distracted. In that instant, agents seized his laptop open, decrypted, and logged into Silk Road as the administrator. It was over. On his computer, investigators found chat logs, journals, and spreadsheets detailing Silk Road's operations. They also found evidence suggesting that Ross had contemplated or commissioned violence to protect his identity, allegedly arranging hits on individuals he believed were threats. While no murders were ever confirmed, the allegations added fuel to the prosecution. Ross was charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering, computer hacking, and drug trafficking. In 2015, after a sensational trial in New York, he was found guilty on all counts. The sentence: double life imprisonment plus 40 years. No chance of parole. Supporters of Ross argue that the sentence was excessive. They view him as a political prisoner, someone who dared challenge a broken system. His mother, Lynn Ulbricht, continues to campaign for his release. Others, especially victims of the opioid crisis, see him as a criminal who enabled suffering. Today, Ross sits in a maximum security prison. Silk Road is gone, but its legacy lives on. Countless dark web marketplaces have risen and fallen in its wake. Bitcoin, once a novelty, is now mainstream. And debates over privacy, encryption, and digital freedom rage louder than ever. Was Ross a visionary or a villain? A freedom fighter or a reckless anarchist? The answer may depend on your politics, your morality, or your place in history. But one thing is certain: the Silk Road forever changed the internet and the world. Daisy's destruction, the darkest depths of the dark web. There are stories so horrifying, so deeply disturbing, that even the most seasoned investigators are left shaken. Among the darkest tales of the dark web lies one that continues to haunt anyone who's heard of it. It is not just a story, it is a tragedy, a crime against innocence, and perhaps one of the most heinous documented acts committed through the digital veil of the deep web. This is the story of Peter Scully and the video that came to be known as Daisy's destruction. Peter Gerard Scully was born in Melbourne, Australia, in 1963. For most of his early life, he flew under the radar, a businessman with a trail of failed ventures, financial fraud, and a mounting record of criminal activity. But what no one knew was that Scully was hiding a darkness far deeper than mere white-collar crime. By the late 2000s, Scully fled Australia under suspicion of fraud and settled in the Philippines. It was there, in the impoverished communities of Mindanao, that he began constructing a horrific empire hidden from the world, an empire fueled by the anonymity and lawlessness of the dark web. Scully's victims were children. Often from slums and vulnerable families, they were lured with promises of food, shelter, or education. Parents, desperate for survival, sometimes unknowingly handed their children over. Others were simply kidnapped. Once under Scully's control, these children were subjected to unimaginable abuse. He created a network of child sexual exploitation films distributed through a subscription-based platform hosted on the dark web. Among the most infamous of these videos was one that would become symbolic of ultimate evil, Daisy's destruction. Unlike many urban legends of the dark web, Daisy's destruction is real, and it shocked even the most jaded investigators. The video was named after one of the young victims, Daisy, an 18-month-old baby. The film was divided into segments, each showing horrific acts of abuse, physical torture, and psychological torment. Scully was not alone. He had recruited teenage girls, former victims themselves, to become perpetrators under his control. They participated in filming, restraining, and even tormenting the younger children. In one part of the film, Daisy is seen crying helplessly as she is tortured. The perpetrators smile, mock, and treat the abuse like a game. There are no special effects, no cuts, just the raw, evil truth of human depravity. The entire production was not only filmed, but sold online for thousands of dollars, paid in cryptocurrency. Wealthy pedophiles across the world became clients of Scully's twisted marketplace. When international law enforcement finally caught wind of Daisy's destruction, it sparked a massive manhunt. Europol, Interpol, and the Philippine National Police began tracking every digital lead. Scully, believing he was untouchable, continued to produce content. But the net was closing. In 2015, police finally arrested Peter Scully in Malabale, Bukidnon, a remote area in the southern Philippines. What they uncovered was a house of horrors. They found hidden rooms, shackles, recording equipment, and evidence of physical remains. Some victims were never found. Among the rescued were 2 girls who had been chained and starved in a small underground cell. Authorities pieced together the extent of Scully's operations. He wasn't just a predator, he was running a business. From dark web forums, he advertised custom videos. Wealthy buyers could request specific scenes to be filmed. Prices ranged from $1,000 to over $10,000 per video. Scully's partners were also arrested, including his girlfriend and teenage accomplices who had aided in the abuse. One of them, a girl named Lizelle Margallo, had lured children and participated in several videos. She was captured in 2017 after 2 years on the run. When questioned, Scully showed no remorse. In court, he smiled. He insisted that what he did was business, and at times, tried to justify his actions through twisted logic. He even expressed interest in writing a memoir from prison. The court system moved slowly, as the scale of his crimes overwhelmed even seasoned prosecutors. Eventually, Peter Scully was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, but further charges continue to emerge as more evidence comes to light. He now faces additional life terms as new victims are identified. Daisy's destruction became a symbol. Not just of what Scully had done, but of what the dark web could become in the absence of morality, oversight, or accountability. Unlike fictional red rooms or urban legends, this case was real. The victims were real. The suffering was real. To this day, the video is not available to the public, and for good reason. Viewing or possessing it is illegal in almost every jurisdiction. Those who claim to have seen it report sleepless nights and psychological trauma. Even the agents involved in the investigation required therapy after witnessing the footage. The trauma caused by Peter Scully ripples outward through the families of the victims, the minds of investigators, and the broader internet community that once thought such evil was impossible. And yet, amid the horror, there is resilience. Survivors have begun the long journey of healing. Organizations have strengthened their global fight against child exploitation. And Scully's case became a turning point, a rallying cry to bring down dark web predators and protect the innocent. Peter Scully sits behind bars, but his crimes remain a chilling reminder that monsters don't always hide in forests or haunted houses. Sometimes, they hide behind screens, in plain sight, cloaked by technology, and enabled by silence. This is not just a story about the dark web. It's about the darkest corners of the human soul. And how, even in the digital age. Red rooms, the deep web's most terrifying myth. There are whispers that echo through the darkest corners of the internet, stories of secret rooms, hidden live streams, and paid torture sessions. These tales are not about mere criminals or hackers, but about something far more sinister, an idea so horrifying that it blurs the line between myth and reality. This is the story of the Red Room, a deep web legend that refuses to die. But is there truth behind it? Or is it simply the internet's most terrifying modern myth? It begins with a rumor. Somewhere, buried beneath layers of encryption and anonymity, exists a place where people are kidnapped, tortured, and sometimes murdered while strangers from around the world watch it unfold in real time. These viewers, it's said, can pay to influence what happens. Want to see someone electrocuted? Type your command. Want the torture to stop? Bid higher than the others. This isn't the plot of a horror movie, it's what many claim is happening inside the so-called Red Rooms. The term Red Room is said to have originated in Japanese internet horror circles, later spreading to English-speaking forums like Reddit, 4chan, and dark web discussion boards. It gained traction in the early 2010s when deep web exploration became a trend among curious users and YouTubers. Many reported coming across strange.onion sites with cryptic symbols, countdowns, or paywalls labeled live torture show. Some said they saw chat boxes, Bitcoin addresses, and viewer-controlled polls. Others claimed they entered these sites only to see nothing but a black screen. A few reported that they were sent malware or received threatening emails after visiting these alleged pages. But the question remains, were any of these sites real? Law enforcement agencies around the world have repeatedly stated that they've never confirmed the existence of a true Red Room. According to the FBI, Interpol, and cybersecurity experts, no actual evidence of a live-streamed, pay-to-play torture session has ever been found. Yes, there are snuff films. Yes, there is horrific abuse content on the dark web. But a real-time, interactive murder show? That's a different level, one that would require significant bandwidth, reliable anonymity, and the willingness of hundreds of viewers to remain silent forever. And yet, the stories persist. One of the most famous Red Room myths involves a site called peterroom23.onion, which was said to show a man in a dimly lit room, tied to a chair. Viewers could vote on what would happen next: burn, cut, drown, starve. Allegedly, a timer would count down, and the highest bidder's vote would be carried out live. Another legend tells of a woman who stumbled onto a Red Room link posted in a hidden forum. She claimed to have watched in horror as a masked man tortured a girl while chat messages scrolled alongside the video. She disconnected in shock, but days later, she claimed to receive an anonymous message that read, "We saw you." No screenshots were ever verified. No video clips confirmed. And no site archives recovered. So what explains the persistence of the Red Room myth? Psychologically, the concept of the Red Room taps into some of our deepest fears, the idea that evil is not only real, but that people are paying to watch it happen. It plays into our discomfort with voyeurism, our fear of the unknown, and our mistrust of digital anonymity. The internet has always been fertile ground for urban legends: Slender Man, Momo, the deep web hitman, and more. Red Rooms fit perfectly into this lineage. Their appeal lies in their plausibility. With modern technology, encryption, and cryptocurrency, it could happen. And that possibility is enough to keep the myth alive. Hollywood and popular media haven't helped. Films like Unfriended, Dark Web, and shows like Mr. Robot have dramatized versions of Red Rooms, adding layers of realism to the idea. Even creepypasta stories have adopted the theme, making Red Rooms a fixture in digital horror culture. Meanwhile, cybercriminals have taken advantage of the myth. Many Red Room scams exist solely to extort money. These fake sites claim to offer live torture but instead trick users into paying Bitcoin before disappearing, or worse, stealing their data. In some cases, victims have been blackmailed after engaging with Red Room hoaxes. But what if, hidden in the endless anonymity of the dark web, something like a red room did exist. Some cybersecurity experts believe it's theoretically possible. With modern Tor relays, hidden hosting, VPN chains, and private forums, a well-funded criminal network could set up a private stream. But it would be a logistical nightmare. Live video streaming through Tor is highly unstable, making it difficult to run real-time shows. Hosting something so illegal would require extreme precautions. And one leak, one screenshot would be enough to dismantle the entire operation. There are darker examples in real life. Crimes committed and filmed, abuse distributed through hidden networks, and human trafficking rings operating with chilling efficiency. So while red rooms may not exist as described, their spirit lives on in other, equally disturbing corners of the internet. In the end, the red room legend may not be about whether it's real, it may be about what it represents. The fear that someone, somewhere, is watching the worst humanity has to offer. The terror that money and anonymity can strip away morality. And the haunting idea that we could be just one wrong click away from seeing something we were never meant to see. So, next time you hear someone whisper about a red room on the dark web, ask yourself, is it just a story? Cannibal Cafe, the true story of Armin Maiwis, the internet cannibal. Some horror stories feel like nightmares. Others are so bizarre and brutal, they challenge our understanding of morality, consent, and human nature. The story of Armin Maiwis, known as the Rothenburg Cannibal, is one such tale, a true account of consensual cannibalism, a murder arranged online, and a community hidden in the early internet's shadows. This is the disturbing and very real story of the Cannibal Cafe and the man who used it to find someone willing to be eaten. It began in early 2001, when the internet was still young and unregulated spaces like forums and chat rooms flourished. In a corner of the web few had heard of, there existed a site called the Cannibal Cafe, a fetish forum where users openly discussed fantasies of cannibalism, domination, and extreme submission. Most treated the forum like dark fantasy roleplay. But for Armin Maiwis, a 39-year-old computer technician from Rothenburg, Germany, it was something else, an opportunity to turn a lifelong obsession into reality. From childhood, Maiwis had been fascinated by the idea of eating another person. He claimed the fantasy stemmed from loneliness, abandonment by his father, and the desire for permanent human connection. To him, consuming someone was the ultimate form of possession, a way to make sure they never left. So, he posted on the Cannibal Cafe under the alias Frankie, writing a chilling ad. Looking for a young, well-built man who wants to be eaten. Shockingly, someone replied. Bernd Jürgen Brandes, a 43-year-old engineer from Berlin, had his own dark desires. He had long harbored masochistic fantasies and, by all accounts, was emotionally troubled. When he found Maiwis's ad, he didn't just respond, he volunteered. They began exchanging emails and eventually met in person at Maiwis's home in Rothenburg. What followed was one of the most bizarre and gruesome consensual acts in modern history. On March 9, 2001, Brandes arrived at Maiwis's secluded farmhouse. The two men agreed on everything in advance. Maiwis had even drawn up a written contract, signed by both parties, detailing that Brandes had consented to be killed and eaten. He had also recorded the entire encounter on a 2-hour video later used as critical evidence in court, but so graphic that it was never released to the public. The events of that night are difficult to recount but crucial to understanding the case. After mutual discussion, Brandes ingested sleeping pills and alcohol to dull the pain. Then, with Brandes's encouragement, Maiwis amputated his penis. Both men attempted to eat it first raw, then cooked. Reports claim they tried frying it with garlic and butter, but the attempt failed. Eventually, Brandes fell unconscious due to blood loss. Hours later, Maiwis killed him with a stab to the throat. He then suspended the body, butchered it over several days, and stored parts in a freezer under false labels. Over the next 10 months, Maiwis consumed more than 20 kilograms of human flesh. He may never have been caught had he not returned to the internet. In late 2002, Maiwis posted new ads seeking fresh volunteers. But this time, someone reported him to the authorities. German police raided his home and found the disturbing evidence: body parts, video recordings, and remnants of Brandis's remains. The story exploded into international headlines. Many could not believe it was real. The idea of consensual cannibalism was both incomprehensible and legally uncharted. Maiwis readily confessed, insisting Brandis had fully consented and was a willing participant. But the German legal system was forced to answer a harrowing question: can a person legally consent to being killed and eaten? In 2004, Maiwis was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. But the case did not end there. The public outcry, combined with the disturbing nature of the crime, led to an appeal. In a second trial in 2006, prosecutors argued that killing someone for pleasure even with their consent was murder. The court agreed. Armin Maiwis was convicted of murder and disturbing the peace of the dead, and sentenced to life imprisonment. Today, he remains in prison, reportedly a model inmate. He has expressed remorse, converted to vegetarianism, and even cooperated with criminologists studying extreme fetishes and psychological deviance. The case of Armin Maiwis is still studied today not just for its shock value, but for the moral and legal questions it raised. Does consent make an act moral or legal? Where do we draw the line between fantasy and criminal behavior? How should society respond to dangerous desires enabled by the internet? The Cannibal Cafe site was shut down shortly after Maiwis's arrest, but its legacy and the fascination it spawned lives on in books, documentaries, and films. From tabloids to academic journals, the Rotenburg cannibals case continues to challenge our perception of control, autonomy, and monstrosity. For some, Maiwis is a monster. For others, he's a man whose pathology went unchecked in an age where any desire, no matter how extreme, could find an echo online. In the vast digital sea of darkness, the Cannibal Cafe was just a tiny island, but its story stands as a chilling testament to what happens when forbidden fantasies collide with real-world actions. The horror wasn't just what Armin Maiwis did. It's that someone else asked him to do it.